My name's Adam. I'm 31, and I've always believed that family comes first. I was raised to think that no matter what, you stand by your blood. You help them when they fall, you share when you have more, and you forgive when they mess up. That's how my mother raised me. Or at least, that's what she used to say. Over the years, I started realizing that what she really meant was family comes first, as long as you're the one giving. I grew up in a small, middle-class neighborhood, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. My dad worked in construction until a back injury forced him onto early retirement, and my mom was a homemaker who occasionally took on babysitting jobs for neighbors. We never had much, but we were never desperate either. I was the oldest of three. Then came my brother Mark, who's 2 years younger than me, and my sister Lily, who's 5 years younger. Mark was always the golden boy. He had that effortless charm, the kind that made people excuse his mistakes because he didn't mean it. And Lily, she was the baby of the family, the one everyone wanted to protect. I was the reliable one, the one who stayed out of trouble, who worked part-time in high school, who fixed things around the house when Dad's back gave out. The good son. Being the good son sounds nice on paper, but in my family, it just meant I was expected to handle things. If Mark crashed the car, I was the one helping cover the repair. If Mom forgot to pay the electric bill, I was the one transferring money. If Lily needed tuition help, I was the one setting aside my own savings. At first, I didn't mind. It felt good to help them. But as I got older, I started noticing how little gratitude came with it. There was always an expectation, never appreciation. When I was 25, I landed a good job in IT after years of grinding through college and freelancing on the side. I wasn't rich, but I was stable. I'd paid off my student loans early, I had a small apartment, and I'd started investing carefully. My parents always compared me to Mark. He bounced from job to job, rarely keeping one for more than 6 months. He was charismatic but irresponsible. He'd start business ventures that never went anywhere, always asking me for just a small loan to help him get started. For years, I gave in. I told myself he was still figuring things out, that maybe one day something would click. It never did. By 29, I was doing well enough that I could help my parents in a big way. Their mortgage had been slowly choking them for years, missed payments, mounting interest, stress hanging over every dinner conversation. I remember the night Mom called me crying because the bank had sent another final notice. I told her not to worry, that I'd take care of it. And I did. I paid off the entire remaining balance, close to $85,000. It wiped out a huge chunk of my savings, but seeing the relief on my mom's face made it feel worth it. She hugged me, crying, saying I'd saved the family home. My dad shook my hand in silence, which was his way of saying thank you. Mark congratulated me too, in that casual, half-joking way he always did. Guess it pays to be the nerd, huh? At the time, I laughed it off. I didn't think much of it. But over the next few months, something started to shift. The way they talked to me changed. I noticed small remarks, little digs that I brushed off at first. Mom would make jokes about how I liked showing off. Mark would tell people, Adam's basically our sugar daddy now, followed by a laugh like it was all in good fun. Lily would joke about how I was buying love with cash. I knew they were joking. At least, I told myself they were. But each comment chipped away at something inside me. I had sacrificed years of saving, my plans for a house of my own, just to make sure they were okay. And somehow, I'd become a punchline. The breaking point didn't come all at once. It started quietly, subtle signs that they didn't really see what I did as generosity. More like obligation. One day, I overheard Mark on the phone with someone, saying, Adam just thinks he's the hero because he threw some money at the problem. He didn't know I was in the next room. When I confronted him about it, he just laughed and said, Man, relax. I was kidding. You're too sensitive. That was his favorite defense. Every insult was a joke. Every jab was just teasing. Things escalated the following year. After paying off the mortgage, I'd agreed to help with small things, property taxes, repairs, groceries, because my dad's condition had worsened. But after a while, small things turned into constant requests. It felt like every month there was a new crisis. The car broke down. We need help with bills. Mark's business didn't take off. Can you lend him something for rent? I started to say no more often, gently at first. I'd explain that I was saving for my own future, that I wanted to build something for myself. Every time, Mom would guilt trip me. We didn't raise you to turn your back on family, Adam. Still, I kept helping. I told myself it was temporary, that once Mark got on his feet, things would get easier. But Mark never got on his feet. He got comfortable leaning on mine. Then came the voice memo. It was a Sunday evening, about a month after I'd sent over another few $1,000s to help with unexpected repairs. I was cleaning up my apartment when my phone buzzed. It was a voice message from Mark on WhatsApp. I figured it was about the money or maybe something casual. I opened it, pressed play, and heard laughter. Not just any laughter, my family's laughter. At first, I thought it was a butt dial, some random background noise. But then I heard my mom's voice, clear as day. He really thinks he's some kind of savior, doesn't he? Paying off the house like that made him think he's important. Then my dad's voice, quieter but still audible. He means well. He just thinks money makes him worth something. And then Mark, laughing loudest of all. Yeah, he's like a pathetic man-child playing rich uncle. Wait till he realizes we'd still be fine without him. They laughed harder. My mom added, he just needs to feel needed. Let him. It makes him feel like he matters. My stomach dropped. I stood there in silence, listening to their voices fill my apartment, their words echoing in my head like a cruel joke. I must have replayed it 10 times, hoping I'd misheard something, that there was some context I was missing. But no, it was exactly what it sounded like. They weren't grateful. They were mocking me. I didn't respond. I didn't call Mark, didn't text my mom. I sat on my couch for hours, phone in hand, staring at the voice memo like it was something poisonous. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing their laughter in my head, especially Mark's. I'd spent years defending him, covering for him, sacrificing my own comfort for their stability, and this was how they saw me. The next morning, I made coffee and tried to convince myself not to overreact. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe it was just bad timing, a joke gone too far. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But the more I thought about it, the more things started to make sense. The little jokes, the passive-aggressive comments, the way they only called when they needed something. It had been there all along. I'd just been too blind to see it. When the next bank transfer came up, a few weeks later, for the property taxes, I got a text from my mom. Sweetie, could you please send it by Friday? The deadline's coming up. I stared at that message for a long time. Normally, I would have just sent the money without thinking twice. But this time, something in me shifted. I didn't reply. I didn't send anything. And that's when everything started to unravel. The silence after that voice memo stretched into weeks. I didn't message anyone from my family. No texts, no calls. I ignored the group chat, the memes Mark sent, the little check-ins from my mom that always came right before she asked for something. I wanted to see how long it would take before they noticed my distance. Turns out, not long at all. 3 days after I ignored the property tax request, Mom called me. When I didn't answer, she left a voicemail that started off gentle, almost motherly. Adam, honey, just wondering if you saw my message. The taxes are due soon, and I don't want to get another fine. Then, a small pause, her tone sharpened. You know, you've always been so responsible. Don't start worrying us now, okay? I didn't respond. 2 days later, another call. This time, her tone had lost all warmth. Adam, this isn't funny. You promised to help with the house. Don't start going back on your word now. That line got under my skin. Promise to help. I had never made a promise. I had chosen to help. But to her, that difference didn't matter. Mark called next. Hey man, Mom's freaking out. You gonna send them money or what? I told him calmly that I wasn't sending anything this time. There was a long pause. Then his tone changed completely. Dude, what's your deal? You think you can just stop helping when you feel like it? We've got responsibilities here. We. The word made me laugh bitterly. There was never a we when I was working overtime or calculating how to balance my rent with their bills. There was only me. Mark kept talking. You've been acting weird lately. Are you seeing someone? Or is this one of your dramatic moods again? I wanted to tell him everything. About the voice memo, about the laughter, about how I'd replayed it 100 times. But something held me back. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the quiet satisfaction of knowing something they didn't know yet. I'm just taking a break from things, I said finally. He scoffed. From helping your family? Wow. Real mature, Adam. He hung up. After that, I expected the cold shoulder to last a few weeks. Instead, it turned into a storm. Mom started calling mutual relatives, complaining that I was withholding money and letting the family struggle. My aunt called me one evening saying, "Sweetheart, your mother's worried sick. Why don't you just help with the taxes? You've always been the dependable one." That phrase, the dependable one, kept coming back. Dependable. Not appreciated, not loved. Just the family's financial safety net. A week later, I finally got a message from Lily. She usually stayed out of family arguments, so when I saw her name pop up, I hesitated before opening it. "Hey Adam, I don't know what's going on, but Mom's really upset. She said you're refusing to help. Can you just call her? You know how she gets." I stared at the screen. I typed a few replies, deleted them all, then finally settled on, "I'll call when I'm ready." I didn't tell her what I'd heard. I didn't want to drag her into it. But the truth was, I'd started looking at every interaction differently. Every laugh, every compliment, it all felt like manipulation now. The days passed, and I buried myself in work. I'd stopped visiting home, stopped picking up weekend calls. For the first time in years, I focused entirely on myself. It felt foreign, almost selfish, but also freeing. I started going to the gym again, eating better, even applying for a higher position at work. I thought maybe distance would make them realize how much they relied on me. But instead of reaching out with understanding, they retaliated. One Friday evening, I got an email from the bank. One of my accounts had been flagged for a potential security issue. I logged in immediately and noticed a $3,000 withdrawal I hadn't made. My heart sank. The money had gone to Mark's name. He still had access to an old shared account I'd set up years ago when I used to help him with budgeting. I'd completely forgotten it existed. I called him instantly. "Mark, did you take money from my account?" He didn't even sound guilty. "Relax, man. It was for the car repairs Mom needed. You weren't answering, and we couldn't just sit around waiting." "You stole from me," I said quietly. "Stole?" He laughed. "Come on, don't make it sound criminal. It's family. You would have helped anyway." My hands were shaking. I could barely form words. "You had no right." "None." He got defensive. "Oh, don't start with your self-righteous nonsense. You're not some victim here, Adam. You're just mad because you didn't get to play the hero this time." That line cut deeper than he realized. Play the hero. That's what they thought of me. Not as someone who cared, but as someone feeding his ego through generosity. I ended the call mid-sentence. The next morning, I called the bank, froze the account, and changed every password I could think of. Then I sat on my couch, staring at the wall. Anger didn't even feel like the right word. It was more like grief, a slow, suffocating realization that my family didn't see me as a person anymore. I was just a resource. 2 days later, Mom showed up at my apartment. I hadn't given her my address, but apparently Lily had. She stood at my door, eyes red, holding a casserole dish like we were about to have dinner instead of a confrontation. "Adam, can we please talk?" she said. I hesitated before letting her in. She walked in like she owned the place, setting the dish on my counter. "Your brother told me you overreacted," she began, her tone soft but manipulative. "He only took what was needed. You know we'd never steal from you." I took a deep breath. "That's exactly what he did, Mom. He took my money without asking. That's theft." She gave me that look, half disappointment, half pity. "Honey, this is why people think you're too rigid. You always see things in black and white. Family doesn't keep score." "I'm not keeping score," I said quietly. "I'm just done being used." Her face hardened. "Used? We're your family. Everything you have is because of us. Don't you forget who raised you." That hit me like a slap. I stared at her, realizing that nothing I said would change her mind. She didn't want to understand. She wanted control. She kept talking, guilt-tripping me with every line. "You think money makes you better than us? You think you can just cut us off and live alone? You'll see, Adam. One day you'll realize how much you need your family." I didn't reply. I just walked to the door and opened it. She looked shocked for a moment, like she couldn't believe I was serious. "You're kicking your mother out?" "I'm asking you to leave," I said. My voice was calm, but my hands were trembling. She didn't move at first. Then, when she realized I wasn't backing down, she picked up her casserole dish and stormed out, muttering under her breath. That was the last time I saw her in person for months. After that, things escalated behind my back. Mark started spreading rumors to relatives that I'd lost it, saying I'd become arrogant after making some money. He told people I'd cut off Mom in her old age, painting himself as the loyal son who stayed to help. Even Lily started acting differently, shorter texts, awkward silences. I could tell she didn't know who to believe. I tried to move on. I focused on my job promotion, my health, anything that wasn't them. But every time my phone buzzed, I felt that tightness in my chest, half expecting another manipulation disguised as concern. Then came the betrayal that broke whatever was left of me. It happened 3 months after I'd gone no contact. I was at work when I got a call from my boss. "Adam, did you authorize a background check request for a personal matter?" Confused, I said no. He told me someone claiming to be a relative had contacted HR pretending to be my emergency contact, trying to get information about my salary and benefits. They'd even used my full name and birth date. HR flagged it as suspicious and stopped the process. When they gave me the phone number attached to the request, I already knew whose it was. Mark. That night, I called him. I don't even know why. I guess I needed to hear him admit it. "Why would you do that?" I asked. My voice was shaking, but I kept it steady enough. He sighed, like I was being dramatic again. "Relax. I just needed to know how much you were making. You keep saying you're broke, but come on. We both know you've got plenty saved. So you tried to access my employment records?" He laughed, like it was all one big joke. "You're so paranoid. It's not like I hacked into anything. I just called and asked. Don't act like you're some victim here, Adam." I could barely speak. "You crossed a line." He snapped back. "You crossed it first when you abandoned us." I hung up before he could say another word. That night, I sat in the dark for hours, trying to figure out when exactly things had gone so wrong. I had always thought love meant sacrifice, that giving was proof of caring. But with them, giving had only taught them how much they could take. And as I sat there, scrolling through old messages, I came across the voice memo again, the one that had started all of this. I played it one last time. They laughed. They mocked. They tore me apart behind my back. And somewhere between the echoes of their laughter, an idea began to form. Not out of anger this time. Out of clarity. If they thought I was a pathetic man-child who thinks money makes him worth something, then they were about to learn just how wrong they were. Without a single word from me. Because the next bank transfer was coming up soon. And this time, they weren't going to like what came with it. The weeks after that last phone call with Mark were some of the quietest of my life. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful. More like standing in the aftermath of a storm, when everything looks calm, but the air still hums with what's been destroyed. I'd gone through every stage of emotion in silence. Anger, grief, disbelief, bitterness. But the hardest part wasn't losing them. It was realizing I'd never truly had them. I'd built my life around being their provider, their fixer, their buffer against consequences. Without that role, I didn't know who I was. I'd wake up in the mornings expecting a call, a text, some new emergency. When none came, I'd sit there with my coffee, scrolling through old chats like an addict chasing the next hit of purpose. Work became my distraction. I threw myself into projects, staying late at the office, volunteering for anything that needed doing. My boss, Lisa, noticed. "You've been on fire lately," she said one afternoon, leaning against my cubicle wall. "Whatever's motivating you, keep it up." I smiled, pretending it was ambition. But the truth was simpler. I didn't know how to stop moving. If I stopped, I'd think. And if I thought, I'd fall apart. It wasn't until one Friday night, sitting alone in my apartment surrounded by takeout containers, that it hit me. I had done everything right. I'd worked hard, been responsible, helped everyone who asked, and still ended up alone. My family had their house, their comfort, their laughter. And I had what? 4 walls and silence. That night, I broke down for the first time in years. Not angry tears, not frustrated ones, just quiet, exhausted crying. The kind that comes when you realize you've been holding your breath for a decade. I remember thinking, if money doesn't make me worth something, then what does? The next morning, I decided to find out. It started small. I woke up early and went for a walk. No headphones, no phone, just me and the sound of my shoes hitting the pavement. The city was still half asleep, streets washed clean by a light rain. For the first time in months, I didn't feel rushed. I didn't feel needed. It was strange, almost uncomfortable, but also liberating. The following week, I signed up for a gym membership. I hadn't exercised regularly since college. The first few days were rough. Every muscle protested, and I felt ridiculous trying to keep up with people half my age, but it gave me something my family never had, structure that depended only on me. Slowly, I started rebuilding. My apartment, which had always felt temporary, began to look like a home. I painted the walls, bought a proper dining table, even framed some of my own photography. Little by little, my space stopped feeling like a waiting room and started feeling like mine. My finances, too, began to stabilize now that I wasn't constantly sending money away. It was strange seeing my account balance stay the same for more than a week. I started budgeting, not to save others, but to invest in myself. I signed up for online courses in cybersecurity, something I'd always been interested in but never had time for. Every night after work, I studied, practiced, and built projects from scratch. Lisa noticed again. "You're different lately," she said one morning. "Not just at work, different. Happier, maybe." I shrugged, just focusing on myself for once. She smiled. "About time." Even though I was moving forward, the shadows of my family lingered. They didn't call, but they didn't need to. Mutual relatives kept me updated whether I wanted them to or not. My aunt mentioned in passing that Mark was bragging about a new car, claiming he'd gotten a business loan. I knew exactly where that loan had come from. The same line of credit he'd taken out under my name years ago when I co-signed for him. I'd been paying it quietly ever since. Then there was Mom. Word got around that she was telling people I'd cut her off after everything she'd done for me. That one stung the most. For a while, I thought about reaching out, sending one message, one explanation, one last attempt at peace. But every time I drafted the text, I heard that voice Memo in my head again. Her voice, saying I needed to feel needed. I deleted the drafts every time. Months passed, and something strange happened. I stopped checking my phone as much. I stopped waiting for apologies that were never coming. I started sleeping better. For the first time in years, my mind was quiet. Not from suppression, but from acceptance. The biggest shift came the day I got the email. Lisa called me into her office and handed me a letter. "You've been here 5 years," she said. "You've taken on more work than anyone I know, and you've grown in every way possible. I think you're ready for something bigger." It was a promotion. Senior IT project manager, with a raise big enough to double my income. For a moment, I just sat there, stunned. I thought about all the times I'd poured money into other people's problems, all the nights I'd stayed up working just to cover bills that weren't even mine. And now, here I was, finally reaping the benefits of my own effort for me. That night, I didn't celebrate with anyone. I ordered my favorite food, played old jazz records, and watched the city lights through my window. For once, I didn't feel lonely. I felt complete. Still, part of me wondered what my family would say if they knew. Would they be proud? Would they even care? Probably not. They'd find a way to twist it, to make it about themselves. I thought I'd left it all behind, until the letter came. It arrived 2 weeks after the promotion, in a plain white envelope with my parents' address printed in familiar handwriting. No return name, just the address. My first instinct was to throw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a note from Lily. "Adam, I know you don't want to hear from us, but things have gotten bad. Mom's been sick, and Mark's been struggling. They're blaming you for not helping, and it's gotten ugly. I don't know what really happened between you all, but I wish you'd just talk to them. They're not okay. Please. L." I stared at the letter for a long time. Lily had always been the peacekeeper, the one who saw the best in everyone. If she was writing, things must have been serious. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was another manipulation, an emotional hook meant to reel me back in. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat on it for a few days, thinking. Part of me felt guilty. The other part, tired. I'd spent years fixing their problems, and they'd used that as proof of love. Maybe the only way to show I'd really changed was to not fix this one. But the guilt wouldn't go away. So one Sunday morning, after weeks of silence, I drove out to my parents' house. The same house I'd paid off. I parked down the street, sitting there for nearly 10 minutes before I found the courage to get out. The lawn was overgrown. Paint was peeling from the porch. The house looked smaller somehow. Fragile. I rang the doorbell, half expecting no one to answer. Mark opened the door. He froze when he saw me, surprise flashing into irritation. "What are you doing here?" I almost laughed. "Just checking in." He looked me up and down, defensive already. "We don't need anything." "Good," I said. "That's not why I came." Before he could reply, Mom appeared behind him. She looked thinner, older, like the years had caught up all at once. Her expression softened when she saw me. "Adam," she said quietly. "You came." I nodded. "Lily said you weren't well." She sighed. "Oh, don't listen to her. She worries too much." But something in her tone told me it wasn't entirely untrue. We sat in the living room. The air was thick with unspoken words. Mark stayed standing, arms crossed. Mom fussed with a teacup, avoiding eye contact. Finally, I said, I heard what you all said about me, The voice memo. The color drained from her face. Mark froze. I continued. You called me pathetic. Said I think money makes me worth something. Mom opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. Adam, we didn't mean. You did, I interrupted gently. And that's okay. I just needed to hear it for what it was. Mark muttered under his breath. You're still holding on to that? Wow. I turned to him. You tried to steal from me, Mark. You pretended to be my contact at work. You crossed every line, and you're still acting like the victim. He glared. You think you're better than us now? No, I said. I just stopped letting you use me. For a moment, no one spoke. The room felt smaller, the silence louder. Mom looked between us, her hands trembling slightly. We just wanted to feel like you were part of the family, she said softly. Everything changed when you started pulling away. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Mom, everything changed when you started laughing behind my back. She didn't deny it. After that, I stood up. I'm not here to fight. I'm not here to gloat. I just wanted you to know I'm doing fine. Really fine. And I hope someday you are too. I left before they could respond. Driving home, I felt something inside me loosen, like I'd finally stopped trying to win a game I never signed up for. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to send, but to remind myself. You don't need to prove your worth through sacrifice. You don't need validation from people who only love the version of you that serves them. You are enough on your own. I folded the letter, slipped it into a drawer, and went to bed with the first real sense of peace I'd felt in years. But peace never lasts forever. Because 2 weeks later, I got another call, from Lily this time. Her voice was shaking. Adam, you need to come. Something's happened. And just like that, the fragile calm I'd built began to crack. I wasn't sure what I expected when Lily called me that night. Panic, maybe. Fear. Or perhaps some kind of twisted plea for help. The line was shaky, her voice almost unrecognizable, the kind of urgency that comes only when someone's world is unraveling fast. Adam, you need to come. Something's happened. I asked her what it was, tried to calm her, but she just kept repeating, I'll explain when you get here. Please just come. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my keys, locked my apartment, and drove to my parents' house. The city at night looked different when you weren't rushing anywhere for anyone but yourself. I noticed the glow of streetlights reflecting off wet asphalt, the faint hum of distant traffic, the way even the smallest things seemed sharper, more real. That clarity, this new perspective, I realized as I drove, had come from months of distance, of focusing on myself. For the first time in years, I wasn't blind to the world. When I arrived, the porch light was on. Lily met me at the door, her face pale, eyes wide, hands trembling. It's Mom and Mark, she said. You need to see it. I followed her inside. The living room was dimly lit, shadows stretching across furniture, the air thick with tension. Mom was sitting on the couch, looking frail, her hands wringing a tissue. Mark was pacing, muttering under his breath, his usual swagger nowhere to be seen. What happened? I asked, my voice steady, though I felt a knot in my stomach. Lily looked at me, desperation in her eyes. They've gotten themselves into a mess. Big one. And you're the only person who can stop it from getting worse. I frowned. Stop it. She nodded, hesitating. It's complicated, but it's mostly Mark. And Mom didn't realize what he was doing until it was too late. You'll understand when you see. I felt a strange mixture of dread and excitement. For the first time, I realized I had leverage. I had spent years watching them take advantage of me, laughing at me behind my back, stealing from me, manipulating me. Now, they had made a mistake big enough that I could actually turn the tables. And part of me, the part one had ignored for months, felt ready to do just that. Lily led me upstairs to Mark's room. The door was cracked, and I could hear him muttering angrily, throwing things across the floor. He looked at me as I stepped in, eyes wide with sudden awareness. You're here? I said nothing, just observed. For the first time, I saw him without the charm that had fooled so many. He looked small, desperate, fragile. And that was when it clicked. He had crossed a line, and now he was exposed. What's going on? I asked, calm but firm. Mom's voice came from the hallway. It's his business, Adam. It's all gone wrong. I turned to her. Tell me everything. And so she did. Over the next hour, she laid it all out. Mark had borrowed money from multiple sources, some legitimate loans, some sketchy lines of credit, pretending he had backing from investors. He'd lied, manipulated, and misrepresented his finances to everyone: family, friends, even business partners. Now, the consequences were crashing down. Creditors calling, legal notices piling up, and the bank had frozen certain accounts due to suspicious activity. "And you didn't think to tell me earlier?" I asked, voice low. Mom looked guilty. "I didn't want to worry you. I thought I could handle it." "Handle it?" I repeated, incredulous. "They've been stealing from me, laughing at me, and now you're hiding this mess? Do you even realize what you're saying?" She flinched. "Adam, please, don't be angry. I'm just trying to keep the family together." I looked at Mark. He avoided my gaze, shuffling his feet. You're mad," he said weakly. I nodded. "Yes, I'm mad. But more importantly, I see an opportunity. And I don't waste opportunities anymore." I left their house that night thinking through every angle. For years, I had been reactive, helping when they asked, compensating for their mistakes, letting them walk over me. But now I wasn't reacting. I was planning. And for the first time, I understood the scope of my power. I knew their weaknesses, I knew their dependencies, and I knew how much they relied on me. The first step was information. I spent the next few days gathering every detail I could about Mark's financial dealings, the loans, the accounts, the small investments he'd made that were now collapsing. Every email, every transaction, every text became ammunition. I documented everything carefully, systematically. No emotion, no dramatics, just facts. I wanted the leverage to be undeniable, the truth so clear they couldn't deny it. Next, I reached out to my allies. Not family, not friends who would sympathize superficially, but people who understood systems, power, and influence. A former colleague who had worked in banking compliance, another friend who specialized in small business law, and a mentor who had taught me negotiation skills. I asked them hypothetically how I would protect myself if someone tried to manipulate and exploit me financially. Their answers shaped the plan I would soon put into motion. Meanwhile, Mark and Mom were spiraling. They didn't know I had seen the voice memo months ago, didn't know I had frozen accounts and tightened security. Mark continued making small, reckless moves, calling creditors, promising payments he couldn't keep. Mom tried to mediate, begging me to intervene quietly. I pretended ignorance, letting them continue, observing every misstep. The thrill of control was intoxicating. For the first time, I felt power not through money alone, but through knowledge, patience, and timing. I began drafting contingencies. If Mark tried to shift blame to me, I had emails, bank statements, and witnesses. If Mom tried to guilt me into rescuing them, I had evidence of her manipulation. Every move they made became a setup for a response that was calculated, deliberate, and unstoppable. At the same time, I rebuilt myself from the inside out. I continued with my promotion, excelled at work, and started investing strategically. I built a reserve I hadn't had before, enough to move quickly if needed. I refined my daily routines, exercising discipline I had neglected, strengthening my mental and emotional resilience. I was preparing for the confrontation ahead not just with leverage, but with unshakable confidence. One morning, I got a tip from a mutual friend who had been unknowingly drawn into Mark's schemes. A supplier Mark had promised payments to had contacted them, frustrated, and was threatening legal action. I saw the perfect opportunity to tighten the noose, but I didn't act immediately. Instead, I documented everything meticulously, time-stamped emails, notes on phone calls, and a detailed map of how Mark's lies had spread through multiple networks. By now, I had begun to see the patterns clearly. Mark's impulsiveness, Mom's need to justify everything he did, Lily's loyalty to both sides. Each of them had weaknesses, and I could predict their reactions almost with certainty. It became a game of anticipation. Every text from Mark was read for clues. Every call from Mom was analyzed for emotional leverage. I even tested small moves, dropping hints that I had information they couldn't imagine I possessed. Their responses were predictable, defensive, desperate, increasingly reckless. And then came the first small victory. A creditor called Mark directly, thinking he had my backing. Mark panicked, called Mom, and for the first time, Mom couldn't fix it. She turned to me, silently pleading, while Mark's desperation filled the phone line. I didn't intervene. I simply listened, taking notes. That night, I realized something profound. For the first time in my life, I wasn't acting out of obligation, guilt, or hope for gratitude. I was acting with intention. I was designing the consequences. And for the first time, I felt truly alive. Not because I had money, not because I had been generous, but because I had control over my own life and the means to assert it. Over the next month, I continued to refine the plan. I separated myself legally from any of Mark's financial ties. I ensured all my accounts were secured and untraceable. I began drafting letters, hypothetical statements, and contingencies that could protect me while exposing them if necessary. Every step was measured, every move calculated. And all the while, they were stumbling blindly through their own chaos, unaware that I was orchestrating a response that would leave them stunned. Then came the moment that truly confirmed I had the upper hand. I received an anonymous tip, a copy of a voicemail from Mark to a business partner, admitting he'd falsified financial statements to cover previous debts. I listened to it alone in my apartment, leaning back in my chair, heart racing. Every word he'd spoken, every lie, every attempt to manipulate had been recorded. And now, I held the key to bring it all to light if I chose. I smiled quietly. Finally, I had the proof, the leverage, and the timing. The scales had shifted, and the family that had once mocked me now had everything to lose. I leaned back, eyes closed, thinking about the next move. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the frantic, impulsive way I had been for years. I was calm, precise, and patient. The time for chaos hadn't come yet, but when it did, it would be perfect. And in that moment, I knew this was not just about money anymore. It was about respect, about finally reclaiming the dignity and control I had spent decades giving away, because they had underestimated me for the last time. I spent the next few weeks watching them from a distance, letting the storm build. Mark didn't know I had all the pieces. Mom didn't know I had stopped playing their game months ago. Lily was the only one who had seen the truth, and she stayed silent, wisely. I didn't need to confront anyone directly yet. Revenge isn't about shouting. It's about timing, patience, and letting someone dig their own hole while you wait quietly. The first move came with Mark's creditors. Using the information I'd meticulously gathered, I began contacting them anonymously, verifying his debts, sending them evidence of the falsified statements he had made, and letting them know that the truth had been uncovered. I made sure that every email, every phone call, every piece of documentation was delivered in a way that made it clear that Mark was completely exposed. There was no threat, no emotional leverage, just facts. The calls started coming in the following week. Mark's phone rang constantly. He answered them frantically, trying to explain, to smooth things over, to plead. But every explanation fell flat because the facts were airtight. The accounts he had tried to fudge, the loans he had lied about, the misrepresented business deals, they were all real and all verifiable. Creditors were calling the police, the bank was flagging his accounts, and every step he took made the web tighter around him. Mom started calling me, trying to guilt me again. Adam, please. I don't know what to do. Mark's panicking. You've got to help him. I stayed calm. Mom, he made his choices. I'm not responsible for them. I can't fix what he's done. You're being cruel, she said, voice trembling. No, I corrected gently. I'm being fair. For the first time in a long time, fairness matters more than comfort. Lily watched silently from the side, and I could see the shame and understanding in her eyes. She had always known. She had always been the only one capable of seeing the bigger picture, the one person who understood that true strength comes from patience and measured action. Mark's downfall escalated rapidly. Within days, his main line of credit was frozen permanently. The business partner he had tried to deceive began legal action. Word spread quickly among mutual friends and colleagues, and the facade of his charisma and competence crumbled completely. He tried to call me, sending frantic messages pleading for help, for forgiveness, for a bailout. I didn't respond. Mom's attempts at manipulation grew more desperate. She came to my apartment one evening, standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Adam, I don't know what to do. Please, we need you. You're our son. You can't let this happen to us. I let her stand there for a long moment, listening to her pleas, watching her crumble under the weight of her own mistakes. Then I spoke, slowly, deliberately. I've done everything I could for you in the past. I've paid off your mortgage, covered your bills, supported your choices. You laughed at me, lied about me, and treated me like I didn't matter. I'm not going to fix what you've broken. This is your responsibility, just as it should have always been. She gasped, her face twisting in disbelief. You're heartless. I shook my head. I'm done being exploited. I'm done being mocked. I'm done being treated like a tool instead of a person. And with that, I closed the door. The final blow came when Mark's fraudulent activities and financial mismanagement became public. His business deals collapsed completely, leaving him in debt, legally exposed, and publicly humiliated. His friends and colleagues distanced themselves. Mom had to face the truth of her own enabling. The way she had ignored warning signs, laughed off my contributions, and covered for Mark's irresponsibility. She couldn't deny the facts. Lily stayed with me throughout the ordeal, a quiet witness to the transformation I had undergone. She never judged me, never pressured me. She simply watched as the people who had taken for granted everything I had done finally faced the consequences of their actions. I didn't gloat. I didn't relish in their pain beyond the satisfaction of justice. I had no need to humiliate them further. Seeing the natural fallout of their choices was enough. Mark called me one last time, voice small, broken. Adam. I didn't realize. I didn't respond. Mom sent letters, texts, messages filled with apologies, justifications, pleas for reconciliation. I read them, folded them neatly, and placed them in a drawer I would never open. I realized that their words, now, carried no weight. They had lost the leverage, the control, the ability to manipulate me. I had risen while they had stumbled, and there was no turning back. For the first time, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't known in decades. My life was mine, not a ledger of favors and obligations, not a series of sacrifices for people who would never understand the value of respect. I rebuilt my savings, advanced in my career, traveled, and invested in my passions. I met new people who treated me with the decency and respect I had always deserved. Months later, I drove past my parents' house one evening. It looked smaller somehow, diminished. I noticed the overgrown lawn, the fading paint, and the quiet emptiness. I realized that in the end, they had created their own downfall. The world didn't need to punish them. I had simply stopped protecting them from the consequences of their own choices. I smiled quietly, thinking back to the voice memo that had started it all. The laughter, the mockery, the words that had once cut me to the bone, they no longer held power over me. I had transformed the pain into strategy, the betrayal into clarity, and the mockery into leverage. In the quiet of my apartment that night, I wrote a final note to myself. I am not defined by the people who try to diminish me. I am defined by the strength I find in standing on my own. And finally, I am free. I folded the note, placed it in my drawer, and looked out the window at the city lights. For the first time, there was no weight pressing on my shoulders. No obligations, no guilt, no resentment, just clarity, peace, and the knowledge that I had reclaimed my life entirely. And in that moment, I realized the final, undeniable truth. The only power they ever had over me was the power I gave them. And now, I had taken it all back. The chapter was closed. The scales balanced. And I had never felt more alive.